Welcome to Cut to the Chase, where we talk about compelling legal, regulatory, and public interest information and news. Your host is Greg Goldfarb, an attorney, entrepreneur, investor, and activist.
Okay, folks, it's time for our favorite podcast, Cut to the Chase. I brought author Galina Vromen on to discuss her latest book, Hill of Secrets. How are you doing today, Galina?
Great. Nice to be with you.
All right, so a lot of us now know of Oppenheimer, Robert Oppenheimer, and the nuclear weapons because of the movie, which came out in 2023. Galina, when did you start? You started writing this well before well before the movie came out. I just want to dispel any myths about you following the movie or the movie following you, perhaps.
Right. Well, Hill of Secrets looks at the domestic side of life on Los Alamos, which Oppenheimer didn't cover. And I began really researching the book probably 20 years ago and writing it 14 years ago. It took me 12 years to write. So I was way before Oppenheimer. And when the movie came out, it was, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to, ever publish this book because the movie's going to cover it all. And then I saw the movie and I was hugely relieved because the movie focuses very much on the scientists and the politics. And I really focused much more on what it was like for the families that moved there. Scientists, the only way Oppenheimer could get people to come was to basically say, well, you can move with your family. And so there were 6,000 people at Los Alamos by 1945. They started moving there in 1943. And a lot of those people were wives and kids. And I really wanted to focus on what it was like for them to live in a place where they didn't know why they were there, because unlike the scientists, they weren't told why they were going there, with spouses for the wives who were not allowed to talk about what they were doing. And it was like, okay, get a life, like how? And that was kind of the major question, one of the major questions in the book. And the other is like, what is the impact of secrets on us, on our families? Here you have spouses where one half of the spouse, the husband couldn't talk at all about what he was doing. So usually the husband, it was almost always the husband. So what was the impact of secrets? And that is why it's called Hill of Secrets.
Okay, and we're going to dive into that topic more in depth. I wanted to kind of give a little bit of background about you and also the book. So Galina has been an international journalist for 2 decades, working at Reuters. And full disclosure, Galina and I are actually friends, and we live neighbors. We do movies together, and so I've gotten to know her over the time that she's been writing this book. During the 12 years or more that I've known Galina, she did keep as a secret from me that she was writing this novel, but she did tell me that she was director of operations in Israel of the Harold Grinspoon Foundation, which launched 2 reading readiness programs, one in Hebrew, one in Arabic, and gifted over 20 million books to children. As well as being named U.S. Library of Congress honoree for best practice in promoting literacy. In addition to Hill of Secrets, she also translated the memoir of Rafi Eitan, a fascinating person in Israel history. And I did start reading that as well. But I want to start off first, Galina. Why don't you describe I know you've given a little bit of the description of the book, but what is the book about? It's a fact fiction book. So give the audience here a little bit of a background about what the book was about.
Well, the book basically traces the lives of 5 characters. Each chapter is in the voice of a different character who are living at Los Alamos between 1943 and 1945 when the atomic bomb was developed there. So the characters are the wife of a chemist who was an art restorer in New York, has always been wanted to be a chemist originally. Then when her husband gets an opportunity to travel to London, she turns her chemistry knowledge into art restoration. And then she's moved back to New York and she started a business. And he says, honey, we're moving to this place. I don't know exactly where, somewhere in the West, and I can't tell you why, but it's all going to work out fine and you'll be fine. And she's not so sure about that. So she arrives in the summer of 1943, very lost. And she meets Gertie, who's the teenage daughter of a German refugee family that is also at Los Alamos. There's Kurt and his wife, Sarah. Kurt is a leading physicist working on the project. And their daughter is Gertie, who's a kind of precocious teenager who's also trying to find her place because they've also come here and nobody told her where they were going and why she's there. And then Sarah is another character. Kurt's wife is extremely concerned, horrified, worried, doesn't know what's happening to the family back in Germany. And then there's Jimmy, who's with the army, because there were a lot of army folks, both men and women, who served at Los Alamos, and he and Gertie develop a relationship. So that's kind of the outline of all the beginnings of what happens, and take it from there. And that's and what happens to them in the course of the 2 years that they live in Los Alamos.
All right, now I did see some reviews and I wanted to share some of them because they really did share. I love the book, and I'm not saying it just because I brought you on here. If I didn't love the book, I wouldn't have brought you on here. But I want to read quickly as I can, 2 reviews that I think really capture how I feel about the book too. One from Samantha Green Woodruff, best-selling author of Lobotomist's Wife and the Trade-Off. And she says, Galina Vromen's Hill of Secrets is a powerhouse of a novel not to be missed. This compelling, thought-provoking story definitely dives into the emotional complexity of the Manhattan Project, particularly for the women behind the scenes. The setting, Los Alamos, during the development of the bomb, serves as a prism to expose the many consequences of secrecy during this singular moment in history, told through multiple points of view, with a strong heroine who refuses to accept things as they are, and a rich supporting cast of well-developed characters. Hill of Secrets has it all. Drama and romance, conflict and pain, compromise and loss, and through it all, hope. I highly recommend this original and haunting book. I'm going to keep this second review for those that actually want to see more about the book. We'll give you details about that at the end of the show. So one of the things that I did like about the way you wrote the book, I like fact fiction because for me, it's a good way to actually learn in a very fun way. And so I love that. And a lot of times after I read a fact fiction book, I'm like, gee, what was fact and what was fiction? And you actually answer that at the end of the book, which was nice, a concise, explanation of what was fact and fiction. So can we go over some of the facts, the factual characters in your book? In particular, I'd like to talk about Maria. So she was actually a factual character, and I'd like you to describe who she was and why she was involved in the book.
So Maria is a potter from the Pueblo village, which is where one of the Native American villages in the area. And she was an outstanding potter, known for her black pottery. She was actually, where I diverged from history is she was actually well known by the 40s. And in my novel, Christine meets her. And they develop essentially an empathetic, collegial, economic relationship where Christine comes to promote her pottery. Maria, I delved a lot into Maria's history to learn about her and her family. She was really a change maker in her community. When she acquired an indoor stove, the rest of the women in the village wanted to start making pottery as well, because they wanted to get the money that she was getting. This is the historical facts. Yeah. And I put in somewhere in there, she gets a stove, but it was really a whole big thing because she basically started a collective of people who were making this gorgeous pottery that today sells for thousands and thousands of dollars.
All right, now it's my understanding that after you wrote the book, you actually had a pleasant surprise with the pottery. with Maria's
Right.
pop.
Well, I gave the book, the manuscript before it was when it was still a manuscript, and I didn't know whether it was ever going to get published. I gave it to a neighbor who was a teacher and very precise in her use of English, and I asked her, and an American historian to boot, and I asked her to read it. And I didn't know until recently that she was actually very reluctant to do that because she thought it would be horrible. But she actually liked the manuscript, and she returned it to me. And in the shopping bag, she said, well, be careful with the shopping bag because there's something else in it. And there was a pot by Maria in the bag. This was my neighbor who lives like maybe 200 yards from me. And it turned out that her father had worked at Los Alamos when it was a boys' school before it was requisitioned by the Army for the Manhattan Project. And when he had lived in Los Alamos in the 30s, he had purchased a pot by Maria, and it was a signed pot by Maria. So that was like, whoa, who would expect that? But that was really amazing. And so I got to handle a pot by Maria. I'd only seen it in museums and in photographs until then.
I think that's almost worthy of a feature film in and of itself. All right, so let's turn the clock back. I understand you worked on this for 12 years. You were at an MFA program when this began.
Right. I signed up for and the writing track of a English program in at Bar Ilan University in Israel, where I was living at the time, and signed up, went to my first class, and I had told the guy when he interviewed me that I wanted to write a book about Los Alamos. And we get to the first class, and then they explain to us that you may not submit chapters of a book for workshopping, only short stories. And I'm like, whoa, like what? I'm here to write a novel. And so I almost dropped out of the program, but I decided, screw it, I'm going to stay, and I will write the chapters as interrelated short stories. So that's kind of what I did. And in fact, only one of the short stories out of the 5 or 6 that I workshopped in the course of that year program actually stayed in the book. But I think there's something to be said for, I got to know my characters, I got to think about them and where they were going, and I got to think about, the arc of a story. So I think those things were valuable, but it was a really crazy way to write a book.
Yeah. And so for anyone that's maybe aspiring to be an author or thinking of, hey, I'd love to write a book, yes or no on the MFA program as a way to, advance that objective?
I don't know. I really don't know. I think the good thing about a program is that it gives you structure, and you have to produce and you have to listen to other people's comments. I actually don't know whether I ended up a better writer before or after. I had published quite a lot of short stories before. So I don't know. I think the most important thing about an MFA program are the relationships you develop with other writers, and some of those have endured. And if you find those 2 or 3 soulmates who you can share stuff with forever after, that's great. But whether you need whether an MFA program is the only way to do it, I don't know. I really
Gotcha.
don't.
So what I love about your book is one of the things that I love about your book is that conceptually, Los Alamos, the Manhattan Project was like the secret of the century. And your novel essentially is writing that's sort of enveloping the whole setting is that fact. But then you take that theme of secrets and you move it towards the personal side of those people that not necessarily were there, but people sort of like that, I guess. And so to me, that was it was brilliant that you would take the overriding concept and develop it in, the fictional side. So let's talk a little bit about what inspired you to write the book. It sounds like before you even did the MFA program, you had decided you wanted to write a book on this exact topic or something similar. How did that happen?
It was on this exact topic. I mean, what happened was that I was walking with a friend who's an American historian, a college friend who became a professor after. And I said, like, so are the students good this year? And da, da, da. And he mentioned that he had a student some of the students were really good. And he had one really interesting senior thesis by somebody who had looked at wives of scientists at Los Alamos and what did they know about the bomb when they lived there. And I was just like, it was like, wow, that is incredible. And I said, well, what was the conclusion? And he said, well, they sort of know and sort of knew and sort of didn't know at the same time. And I thought, wow, that is the nature of secrets, like in a family where you kind of know something is going on, but you don't exactly know what's going on. And I thought, and then it kind of crystallized for me that I really wanted to write about secrets, and why not put it in a place like Los Alamos, which was arguably the most secretive place of the 20th century. And so this whole theme of what sort of subconsciously, subliminally, but you're not told, but it's around. And the atom bomb was the elephant in the room of Los Alamos. I mean, there are 6,000 people living there who aren't allowed to talk about what's happening. And how often does that happen in families? It does. And so I wanted to juxtapose those two things. And then I started playing with that idea. And so that started from just a friendly conversation.
And I don't, when you say secrets in families, I think it extends beyond the families. I think individuals, who doesn't have a secret? And
Well, the book begins with a quote by Andre Malraux, who says, "Man is not what he thinks he is what he hides." And I think to a great extent, we all hide things from ourselves and from others that in some ways do define us.
And do you think, well, during the time period that you wrote this book, that you were thinking about writing it, and even afterwards, the whole theme of secrets, did you gain greater insight into secrets?
I don't think so. I mean, I think I basically want readers to think about the role of secrets in their lives, the secrets that they may have found out about, or the secrets that they have kept, and when is that good and when is that bad. And I just think the whole issue of the role of secrecy in our lives is interesting and also has changed in my lifetime. I think that we as a child, I think, and you may have experienced this also, things were not as open. People did not talk. There was the big C, and gayness was not out there. And when we were kids, and that attitudes have really changed. And I think part of it is that I sort of wonder whether it's maybe changed too much. I mean, everything is now, is it too much information sometimes? And so I think that the whole issue of what are you discreet about and what are you not discreet about? And is something that I wonder about this age. For me, very often it's too much information.
Could this be the age of transparency? What I'm getting at is, the language evolves over time. When I was a younger person, people would use the word transparency, not in the sense of opening up and revealing secrets or not hiding things, but in a different context. But now it seems like every 2 sentences has the word transparency in it. And I just wonder if times have changed so much that it's becoming almost a signature concept for a lot of people. I am transparent. Are you? Is this transparent? It's almost like the opposite, and I think that there's some sub-themes of secrets in your book that when I was wrapping my brain around about how people, basically deal with secrets. Do you keep it? Do you not? It was kind of an interesting process for me to go through in reading your book and thinking about whatever secrets I've had, although I haven't had that many, but in any event. All right. So do you feel like, what was your objective in writing the book? Did you want to write a book? Did you want to write a book about secrets? Or Los Alamos? Like, was there an objective?
I've always wanted to write a novel. This was like something I absolutely aspired to do forever and ever, as far back as I can remember myself, more or less. And I think a lot of people who write as professionally as journalists, they all, like deep inside, they harbor a desire to write a book, often a fiction book. So yeah, I always wanted to be, and the short stories weren't like enough. That's not good enough. You got to write a novel. So that was definitely a motivating factor. But I think that I also have always been, since the age of 17 or so, really concerned about nuclear war. I'd spent a lot of time in Israel. It's hard not to think about nuclear issues when you live there. I read a lot about Israeli nuclear policy or non-policy, if you want to call it that, and the whole situation with Iran. So that is something that has always concerned me. And I also, when you think about it, Hiroshima and Nagasaki and the whole development of the atomic weapons project in America during World War II, which involved 600,000 people in various locations. Los Alamos was just one of them that had about 10% of those people. Then, this was like something that fundamentally changed the world and continues to impact the world. And there was no public discussion about it, none, because it was a war. If you compare that with how much public discussion there was about the civilian use of atomic energy, about the protests that there were, about, nuclear versus other sources, we go on, and we have a public debate about it, which I think is a healthy thing. And the complete lack of a debate on something that so fundamentally changed our lives. And I want people to sort of own that and understand that, and understand the implications for today, which I think is a time that we are closer to the possibility of nuclear war than any time since the Cuban Missile Crisis. Between Ukraine and the situation in the Middle East, we live in a potentially dangerous situation. We live in, I wouldn't even say it's potentially, it is a dangerous situation that could potentially explode into something much worse. And I think we need to be sort of conscious and on the ball about it, and not let things happen in our name that we have not given any okay to at all. And I don't think that America has quite come to terms with what happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It's possible that next year, August 2025, is going to be the 80th anniversary of the dropping of the bomb. But I've had a lot of people who read the book and said, I had no idea so many people died in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It's like, excuse me, where have you been? Like, it's important, and it was done in our names. It was done in the names of America. And it was 160,000 people. There were variations, 120 immediately, 160 in after effects. And we sort of, it's kind of like, oh, it happened, yeah, oh, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but we don't really take it on. And I think we need to be a little bit more conscious about it.
When you say we don't take it on, I think that, the reality is time goes by. People are born, they never heard about it. Who knows whether they were even taught about it in school, or their parents taught them. Maybe their parents don't even realize it. So it was one nice part of your book, is I think it does really get into, without overwhelming the reader, about all of the issues, maybe not all of them, but the politics behind it, how the scientists were handling it, how destructive it was, and how it actually would kill people and all that. I think even people that kind of know a little bit about it, maybe they don't know that much in detail about the grotesque nature of the whole concept and the bomb.
Well, I think that was also one of the objections on the Oppenheimer film, was that it really avoided dealing with the victims. And so do I, to some extent. In other words, my book touches on the issues mostly towards the end. But as you said, I'm not interested in overwhelming the reader. I want the reader to, I'm basically sort of tickling a nerve in the reader to say, whoa, these are important issues, without sort of saying, think about it. these are important issues. And I really, so I think that, because I do think that one of the ways to get people to think is to do something that doesn't overwhelm them. Like when people come to me and they want to talk to me about climate change, it's like, but if it's like something that gets to you in a more, I don't know, it's hard, user-friendly isn't quite the right term, but in a more accessible way that you can begin to think about something without sort of feeling like you gotta slit your wrist because of how horrible it is, I think it's just easier to do.
So after I saw the Oppenheimer movie, I loved it. I know that, it wasn't a perfect movie, but I gained a lot from it, and I sort of got, I wouldn't say Oppenheimer crazy or whatever, but he seemed like a very intriguing character, much more so than I expected. I didn't expect him to have as much pizzazz as he was displayed to have. And when I started to read the book, I was kind of excited to maybe get a little deeper into Oppenheimer, but you really didn't overwhelm the reader. This is not Oppenheimer centric. There's a little, I think, enough about it, about him to make the story comprehensive without, distracting from your objective, which was, it seems like, secrets in human nature, in the plot being, coming from that actual Los Alamos. So, okay, you achieved your objective. You wrote a book. I want to just get this one out of the way before I forget it. Is there another book that you're thinking of writing, or that you are writing? Or is that a secret? Or do you not even want to respond to this?
Let me put it this way. There are expectations that I will write a novel, another novel, possibly a sequel. I have been mulling it over in my mind. I have the theme. I don't have the plot. But it's interesting because with Hill of Secrets, I knew the theme for a long time, and the plot was, all of a sudden I realized, okay, so I've got this theme about secrets, great. Now, okay, I gotta have characters, okay, but they all have to have secrets. Oh my God, I've got to create a plot. And that took me an awful long time, also because of this process of doing it through short stories. But I think, I will probably make an attempt. I need to, I'm gonna do it differently. I wanna do this one with a structured outline for a change. And, but I think I'm thinking about what a sequel would look like.
All right, so we talked a little bit about the process and you short, going from short stories to putting them together. Short stories, so what? So you write a short story, that's chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, just attach them all together, or is there something different about writing a short story versus writing a novel?
I think there's a huge difference, because a short story, you kind of get to your point, and you usually have a very limited number of characters also in a short story, because you can't focus on too many people. And you don't have to develop the consistency of style that you need to develop in a novel. I can have a short story that is very descriptive. I can have a short story that's all dialogue. You can use jargon in one and have very kind of erudite tone in another. In a novel, you really need some kind of consistency. And that was part that I really, really found difficult, because I would read, I'd have these glorious descriptions of a desert that I loved writing, and then I'd have the inside of a house and I didn't describe anything in the house, because that's boring, right? Like, who wants to describe a kitchen? But you can't have a book that's so inconsistent. If you have a lot of dialogue, you can't just have all dialogue in the first half and all description in the second half. It doesn't work that way. You got to spread those things out and have the thing feel balanced, so that you don't say, oh, well, chapter 1 has no description and then chapter 3 is only description. It's kind of like very disconcerting for a reader. So that was something that was a real challenge for me, to look at each chapter and say, well, this one needs to be fleshed out on the dialogue, and this one needs to be fleshed out on the description, and this one needs to be fleshed out on the action, and keeping all that together. And also, there are chapters where not that much happens, and how are you going to get your reader to go to the next chapter? You have to have some kind of hook to keep them going, which you don't have to worry about as much you have to have an arc that's much, much bigger and that has a lot more loops in it to keep, and subplots to keep your people going.
Now, from what I understand of a lot of books, from a lot of books that I've read, that you did not do, speaking of like that little hook, right? So a lot of the hooks that I see are the name of the next chapter is the hook, is like, oh, wow, that sounds kind of interesting. I want to keep reading. What you did something very, I thought, unique, and I want to see, is it really unique, or, and you know, what inspired that? The naming of your chapters. You didn't really name them in the traditional way that people will name chapters. You named them after the character and the month and year of, you know, where we were. What was behind that?
I think actually for multiple points of view, there are a lot of books that do that. There are some that don't, and then you're left guessing who's talking, which I find really annoying when I read books with multiple point of views. I'd like to know like right off. I don't want to feel that I have to guess whether it's who's talking. The dates just help me, you know, they helped me as much as the reader to sort of say, okay, this is happening this, and then also to see, you know, the arc of time, though I do have, let's say, 3 chapters that happen in the same month, but and then one of the things that also I try in the first page or so to place the reader in terms of where it was in relationship to the previous chapter. So even if they haven't read the date, they'll know that this is like later the next day or 3 months later. So that you don't, you know, because a lot of people don't actually notice the date, or they do and they sort of forget about it. So I think the dates are probably less important, but for me, I mean, if you look at a lot of, like, for one of the books that I really loved in terms of plotting is The Help. That bestseller that came out, I don't know, number of years ago, and she has, like, I counted it, I think she has 26 different characters with different chapter headings, and it's phenomenal that she managed to pull it off with all these different points of view. And so 5 is like pretty normal.
That's all right. So 12 years, I would imagine, I know you've touched on maybe some of the obstacles that you had in writing the book, but were there any other challenges or obstacles? I mean, it sounds like during that time period, maybe writer's block, lacking of faith in your work, or what, did you have anything out that you went through that you could share with maybe aspiring authors and how you got through it?
Well, I had, you know, I gave the manuscript at one point to somebody who was in the publishing industry, and she didn't like it very much. And she told me that my short stories were much better than this, and why was I bothering? And I stopped writing for 3 years. I was so like, so I think the real thing for writers is just keep at it. There is nothing that, you know, somebody once said, you can be great if you write, but you can't be great if you don't write. Not everything that you write is going to be great. And so I think that you just have to keep at it. And the other thing is, writers really talk about the first version is what I call the throw up version. It's just like you're spewing shit out. I mean, you're just like, and you're writing and you're writing and you're writing and writing, and 90% of it is not good. And the next is the throw out version. That's when you go through it and say, out, 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 this part's okay, out, 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 this part's okay. And that's kind of, and that can go on forever. I mean, the point is to at some point say, good enough, I'm here, and then just move on. So I think that's really important. Other than that, I mean, I think I've been incredibly lucky that I got published at all in today's world. The Oppenheimer film certainly helped. It's certain, because before that I would say I'm working on a book on Los Alamos, and people didn't know what it was, or they thought it was in Texas. And once the Oppenheimer movie came out, editors knew, well, my agent started the process when the Oppenheimer film was being made, but there was a lot of advanced PR about it, so people did know about it. And that, I think, you know, gave a hook for the book that people could relate to. So I think it was just dumb luck, really.
I don't think so. I disagree. 3 years you took off. What got you back to writing it? Was there like a, oh my God, what am I doing? Or somebody encouraging you? How did that go?
Yeah, I think first of all, I was in a really great writers group. So after I had sort of and I think that kind of gave me the faith to go back and try again. Um, and I think I still wanted to be a writer. I still wanted to be the author of a book. So I sort of had to go back to the trenches and get over it.
Yeah. So what do you think of the book?
I think it's pretty good. Um, I think it's, I think everybody wants to do justice to the subject that they're covering. Um, and what do I think of the book? Nobody's ever asked me that.
Yeah, I'm gonna throw a curveball at
Um,
you.
yeah, I think that the editors that I worked with at the publishing house at Lake Union really were excellent and very smart, and my agent had some really great suggestions. So overall, I read it. I think I've read it since it was accepted for publication. I probably read it accepted by my agent. I've read it like 9 times. And sometimes I read it because there are all the edits, there are copy edits, the this
Yeah.
and the that and that. And then there was a translation into Hebrew. So I read it in Hebrew. And sometimes I read it and go, this is pretty good. This is pretty good. It's like the 8th time. So yeah, I guess
All
it's
right. So you've
okay.
read, after all that, is there like a boy, I wish I would have done something differently?
Well, there's some things that I got rid of at people's suggestions that I'm sort of like, I'm sort of sorry I did. Um, Christine had a gay brother in an earlier version, and
Yeah.
that got taken out. And so that I think is the only thing that I really kind of sort of wondered whether I needed to do. But people sort of said, you're just making this too complicated. Just take it out, simplify it. Some people wanted me to take out Maria, which I refused to do. Um, um, so I don't know. I mean, I think that those were kind of that's the one thing I think I'm sorry that I didn't leave in. That Christine had a brother that she was looking for who had disappeared because his father kicked them out of the house.
All right. And one other, I guess, personal secret for you that you learned of through the process of writing this book was with your father,
Right.
Benjamin. So do you mind sharing that with the
Sure.
it's pretty
So,
interesting.
while I was writing the book, I told my father, who was my big champion. He was like always, he always kept everything I wrote. And so I told him I'm writing a novel, and he said, "What's a novel about?" And I told him, and he said, "Well, I was in the 1950s. I was asked to work on a nuclear project." And I had no idea.
Yeah.
And my mother had no idea. And I
Really?
said, "Really?" And I said, "Well, did you work on the project?" He said, "No, it just wasn't for me to work on nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
It just didn't appeal to me, to be, using my professional skills for that."
Yeah.
And it's really incredible because he passed away in the meantime. And last year I was going over his letters, and I came across all the correspondence of him being asked, and telling him how he would make more money, and that he would have opportunities to travel, and I know that ultimately he said no, thank you.
Yeah.
So
Interesting story. Well, maybe that will be part of the sequel somehow or another. I'm just throwing that out there. I can't stop myself. And a shout out to your mother, Suzanne. I believe she was also an author.
yes, she wrote a book about, oh, actually it's interesting because her book is called Hidden Children of the Holocaust. It's about children um who were hidden in convents, and Jewish children who were hidden in convents in Belgium. And she interviewed both the nuns who hid them and the children themselves, because she did it about 20, 30 years ago, and they were still alive. So she talked to the nuns about their motivation for hiding these children at a tremendous risk to themselves. And it's an interesting book because it really talks about the nuns on the ground who were defying the papal authorities by hiding these children.
All right. Well, our family loves your mom, Suzanne, also a Holocaust survivor. And, shout out to her. I'm going to end this episode with, some pretty predictable questions. What are you reading and who are your favorite authors?
Wow. I just finished a biography of Van Gogh's sister-in-law called the Van Gogh Woman, which was quite good, about this poor wife of Theo van Gogh, who was Vincent van Gogh's brother, and she lived with a crazy brother-in-law who was just very disruptive of their marriage, but incredibly creative and doing all these wonderful paintings that nobody wanted to buy. And then her husband himself, Theo van Gogh, died 3 months after Vincent van Gogh of syphilis, and he was delirious at the end, and he beat her up as part of his delirium, and really, really tragic. But she's the one who made Vincent van Gogh famous, because she got together a one-man show of his afterwards, and she held on to the paintings until they had value, and it's very interesting. It's a really interesting book. My favorite authors, oh my God. Wow, I love Wallace Stegner. I love Philip Roth. I think Zora Neale Hurston is probably one of my top. I mean, Their Eyes Were Watching God is one of the most incredible books I've ever read. Those are the people I really love.
All right, so we're going to end this episode with the other review I was going to read at the beginning, but I do want to read this. Hill of Secrets is one of the best novels I have read in ages, and this is by Valerie Strauss, longtime reporter at Washington Post and editor. I couldn't put it down. Vromen's fully drawn characters and intimate storytelling reveal the complexities of life for those at Los Alamos who knew the big atomic bomb secret and those who couldn't be told. But it also explores the complicated web of secrets we all spin and hold as we navigate our way through life. So, Galina, for those people that are listening, like, oh my God, I can't wait for the show notes to see how to go and buy this book. What's the easiest way to buy your book?
Well, wherever you like to buy books, it's on Amazon, Hill of Secrets. Just look it up, Galina Vromen, and independent bookstores will order it for you, or Barnes and Nobles, or wherever you want to buy it. It's in Kindle form, print form, and audio.
All right, folks, if I haven't gotten you intrigued about this, I don't know what I could do. But Galina, thank you for coming onto my program. I appreciate it. And we will speak soon. All right.
Okay. Thank you very much for having me. And
okay.
I have a website, and there are book club questions and ways to contact me if people want to do this in any kind of discussion forum.
Excellent.
So and thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
I will drop that on my show notes. Her website does have all that and very interesting stuff. All right, Galina, talk to you soon. Very much.
Take care. Bye-bye.
That's all for this episode of Cut to the Chase. But before you go, will you open up your podcast app and give us a 5-star review? You can also leave a comment about what you liked most or other topics you'd like us to cover. And please be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming shows. Thanks, everybody. Be safe out there.